Chapter 9, Tension You Can't Touch. The penthouse was different at night. In the morning, it was a temple of glass and productivity, a place where billion-dollar decisions were made before the first cup of coffee was cold. But tonight, with the city lights shimmering outside like a fallen galaxy, it felt like a cavern of shadows and secrets. Alexander had traded his charcoal suit jacket for a relaxed posture that felt more dangerous than his formal one. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were a map of corded muscle and subtle veins. He didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a king who had finally set aside his crown to survey the land he'd conquered. And tonight, I was the only land in sight. "You changed your hair," he said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to harmonize with the soft jazz playing through the hidden speakers. "I decided I was done with the bun for today," I replied, stepping further into the room. My heels clicked softly on the marble, a rhythmic heartbeat in the stillness. "Why did you cancel the meeting with the Japanese delegation, Alexander? That was a crucial step for the rollout." He turned slowly, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. "The Japanese value patience. They value the idea that something truly important shouldn't be rushed. I decided that tonight there were more important things to attend to than a contract that is already inevitable." "And like what?" "Like ensuring my senior advisor hasn't burnt herself out in her first week." He gestured toward the dining table. It was set for two, no assistants, no servers, just a single bottle of wine breathing in a crystal decanter and a series of silver-lidded dishes. The scent of rosemary, roasted lamb, and something sweet and earthy filled the air. "I'm not burnt out," I said, though my body felt heavy with a fatigue that was more emotional than physical. "Sit, Maya, that's an order, or a request if you're still keeping track of the respect I promised you." I sat. The velvet of the chair was cool against the back of my legs. Alexander walked over and poured a glass of wine for me. As he leaned over, his chest brushed my shoulder, just a ghost of a touch, but it sent a jolt of electricity straight down my spine. He lingered for a second longer than necessary, the scent of his sandalwood cologne wrapping around me like a velvet cloak. "To the things we don't say," he murmured, clinking his glass against mine. I took a sip. The wine was heavy, complex, and expensive. It tasted like velvet and dark cherries. "Is that what tonight is? A night for the unsaid?" "It's a night for the truth," he said, sitting opposite me. The candlelight danced in the gray depths of his eyes, making them look like molten silver. "The board thinks I'm using you. You think I'm a monster. And I think you're the first person in 5 years who hasn't looked at my bank account before looking at my face." "That's because I'm looking for the man who stole my father's life's work," I reminded him, my voice trembling slightly. "And what did you find today in that boardroom? Did you find a thief? Or did you find a partner who gave you the platform to prove you're the smartest person in the room?" I looked down at my plate. "It can be both, Alexander. You can be a thief and a visionary at the same time." "Fair point." He began to serve the food, his movements graceful and efficient. "But you enjoyed it. Don't lie to me, Maya. I saw the way you held that room. I saw the way you looked when Henderson tried to trip you up and you crushed him. You liked the power. You liked the feeling of being untouchable." "Maybe I did," I admitted, my heart racing. "Is that what you want, to turn me into you?" "I want to see what you become when you stop apologizing for your brilliance." He reached across the table, his fingers grazing the back of my hand. I didn't pull away. The contact was brief, but the tension it created was suffocating. It was the kind of tension you couldn't touch, yet it felt as solid as the walls around us. We ate in a silence that was far from quiet. It was filled with the sound of our breathing, the clink of silverware, and the unspoken questions hanging in the air. I could feel his gaze on me, tracing the line of my neck, lingering on my lips every time I took a sip of wine. It was a physical weight, a heat that made the silk of my dress feel too tight. "You're not eating," he noted. "I'm full." "You've barely touched the lamb." He set his fork down and leaned back, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You're thinking about the elevator." My breath hitched. "I'm not." "Liar," he said softly. "You're thinking about the way it felt when I pinned you against that wall. You're thinking about the way your body reacted when I stopped pretending I didn't want to devour you." "Alexander." "And you're wondering why I stopped." He stood up and walked around the table. He didn't stop until he was standing directly behind my chair. He placed his hands on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of my collarbone through the fabric of my dress. I should have moved. I should have stood up and walked to my room, but I was frozen, anchored to the spot by the sheer gravity of his presence. "I stopped because I wanted you to have a choice," he whispered, his lips grazing the shell of my ear. "I wanted you to know that while the contract owns your time, I want to earn your desire. But God, Maya, you make it so difficult to be a gentleman." He slid his hands down my arms, his touch light as a feather, yet it left a trail of fire in its wake. He leaned down, his face pressing into the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "You smell like jasmine," he groaned, his voice a low, primal rasp. "And you feel like silk. I spend all day in meetings thinking about the way you looked in that green dress. I spend all night in my bed knowing you're only 20 feet away through a wall." I turned my head, and suddenly our lips were inches apart. The air between us was charged, a shimmering wall of heat and need. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the battle between the man who wanted to control everything and the man who was being controlled by his own hunger. Then, why the rules? I breathed. Why the distance? Because once I cross that line, Maya, there is no going back. Once I take you, I won't ever let you go. You think you're locked in now. If I let myself have you, I will weave myself into every fiber of your life until you don't know where I end and you begin. He reached out and traced the outline of my lower lip with his thumb. My mouth parted instinctively. The tension was no longer something we couldn't touch. It was a physical ache, a pulsing rhythm that demanded to be satisfied. "Tell me to stop," he commanded, his eyes boring into mine. "Tell me to go back to my side of the table and talk about the FDA. Say it now, Maya." I looked at him, the ruthless billionaire, the man who had ruined and then saved me. I saw the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, the raw, unadulterated want that mirrored my own. "I can't," I whispered. "Alexander POV." Her words were the final crack in the dam. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I simply reached down and pulled her from the chair and into my arms. She came to me like she was born to be there, her hands flying to my neck, her body molding to mine with a soft cry of surrender. I captured her mouth in a kiss that was less of an invitation and more of a conquest. I tasted the wine, the sweetness of her, and the sharp tang of the defiance she was finally letting go of. I backed her up until her hips hit the edge of the dining table. I swept a crystal glass out of the way, not caring as it shattered on the floor, and lifted her onto the mahogany surface. "Alexander," she gasped against my lips, her legs wrapping around my waist, pulling me flush against her. "I've wanted this since the second I saw you," I growled, my hands sliding up her thighs, bunching the fabric of her dress. I've wanted to see you like this, hair down, eyes dark, begging me for more. I'm not begging, she whispered, even as she arched her back, pressing her chest against mine. You will be. I moved my mouth to her neck, marking her skin with a possessiveness that made her moan. The sound was high and sweet, a melody that drove me to the edge of my sanity. I wanted to leave a trail of fire across every inch of her. I wanted her to wake up tomorrow and see my marks and remember that she belonged to me, not because of a piece of paper, but because her body demanded it. I reached for the zipper at the back of her dress. My fingers were shaking, a phenomenon I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager. Maya Sterling was doing things to my composure that a decade of corporate warfare hadn't achieved. The silk fell away, revealing the creamy curve of her shoulders and the lace of her bra. She was perfection, a masterpiece of bone and skin and fire. You are so beautiful it hurts to look at you, I murmured, my forehead resting against hers. I looked at her then, really looked at her. Her face was flushed, her lips swollen from my kisses, her eyes wide and searching. She looked like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for me to either push her or catch her. And in that moment, the tension you can't touch shifted. It became something else. It wasn't just lust. It was a connection so deep it terrified me. I realized that if I took her now, in this state of raw, unbridled emotion, I would be vulnerable too. I wouldn't just be owning her, I would be giving her the power to destroy me. I paused, my hand resting on the small of her back. The silence of the penthouse rushed back in, heavy and thick. What is it? She asked, her voice trembling. I want you, Maya, more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. I pulled back just an inch, looking into her soul. But I want it to be right. I want you to be sure. I don't want you to wake up tomorrow and feel like I used the wine or the atmosphere to trap you. She reached up and cupped my face, her fingers soft against my stubble. I'm sure, Alexander. I've never been more sure of anything. I closed my eyes, savoring the touch. But the CEO in me, the man who lived by rules and strategy, forced me to take a breath. I had spent my life winning by knowing when to push and when to wait. I kissed her one last time, a slow, lingering promise of what was to come. Then, I gently pulled her dress back up over her shoulders. Not tonight, I said, my voice thick with the effort of self-control. Why? She asked, her eyes filled with confusion and a hint of hurt. Because tonight was about the truth, and the truth is you're not just an advisor or a contract, you're becoming the center of my world. I stepped back, the distance between us feeling like a physical ache. I want our first time to be perfect, not on a dining table after a fight, not under the shadow of a business trip. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Go to sleep, Maya. Tomorrow, the rules change. We set the boundaries for what we are. And then I'm going to spend every day making sure you want me as much as I want you. I turned and walked toward the window, my back to her. I couldn't look at her anymore, not without losing the battle I was fighting with my own body. I heard her step off the table. I heard the rustle of her dress. Alexander. Yes. You're a very frustrating man. I let out a short, dry laugh. I know. But you're also right about everything. I heard her walk away, the sound of her bedroom door closing softly behind her. I stayed by the window for a long time, watching the city. My heart was still pounding, my body still screaming for her. I had just walked away from the one thing I wanted most in the world. But as I looked at my reflection in the glass, I saw a man who wasn't just a billionaire or a shark. I saw a man who was finally learning that some things are worth the wait. The tension was still there. It was in the air I breathed, in the rhythm of my heart. It was a tension I couldn't touch, but it was the only thing that made me feel alive. Maya POV. I lay in bed, the sheets feeling like ice against my skin. I could still feel the heat of his hands. I could still taste the wine and the hunger of his kiss. He had stopped. He had actually stopped when he could have had everything. It was the most romantic and the most infuriating thing anyone had ever done to me. He wanted to earn it. He wanted me to be sure. I rolled onto my side, looking at the door that separated our rooms. Alexander Blackwood was a man of power and control, but tonight he had shown me his heart. And it was far more dangerous than his money. I was locked in. But for the first time, I wasn't looking for the exit. I was looking for the way to make him stay. The rules were going to change tomorrow. I didn't know what they would be, but I knew one thing for cert. The tension wasn't going anywhere. And neither was I. Alexander POV. I walked into my own bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence was deafening. I picked up the contract from my nightstand, the document that had started all of this. I looked at her signature. It was bold, defiant, and beautiful. I had told her she was locked in. I had told her she belonged to me for 6 months. But as I lay down, staring at the ceiling, I realized the truth. The contract was just a piece of paper. The real cage was the way I felt about her. And I was the one who had thrown away the key. The tension was just the beginning. The real battle was going to be keeping her once the 6 months were up. And for Alexander Blackwood, losing was not an option.